everyone, and welcome to the lifting. As we kind of alluded to before, we're really excited because today we are going to be talking with Tony Rodrigues again. Say hi, Tony.
Hello.
And for many of you, you recognize his face. Tony Rodrigues is one of the people that have come forward to talk about his experiences with having a 20 and back. Now, Tony has an overall more interesting experience, in my opinion, because Tony was first brought in to be more of a slave, to be utilized by some of these people that are running things for different purposes, including psychic enhancements and psychic abilities that they could utilize. And then he was sold into basically the military side of things. And so he also had experiences there. Many times people that are remembering usually can usually be one or another or something really specific. Tony had a very vast experience in his time. And so we really encourage you to look at this. Last time, we actually let Tony speak about the in general experiences that we had. So we're not going to be doing that today. We're going to put up the link. You can certainly hear the interview. Tony also has a website link where all of his interviews are there, and you're going to see it attached right underneath here. We're going to put the link there as well. But if you just wanted to go to YouTube and search him, you can put in Tony Rodrigues, but you need to also add Secret Space Program, because you'll see a lot of other Tony Rodrigues. But if you put Secret Space Program, you will see his interviews. One of the interviews, not interviews, but one of the things that Tony did that you really may enjoy, because he took a PowerPoint presentation, was at a conference in September. And I can't remember.
I believe it was Detroit, actually.
Detroit Disclosure Conference, yep.
Yeah, so if you can look that one up, it's about an hour and a half or so. But at the end, he also answers some questions from the audience. He brought a PowerPoint to try and give some sort of visualizations to what he was talking about. And it really is excellent. So I would recommend definitely seeing that one as well. So, but today, one of the passions that Chris and I have, there's no secret to our audience that Chris and I have been experiencing some of this as well, and certain memories coming back. But we also have said before to our audience that we know that the people involved, the regular people, are so many more than people can imagine. I think before we kind of said if you were in the top 10% of your class, there is a good chance you were looked over for the Secret Space Program, maybe even brought into it in a while. And then there were just other people brought in for different reasons as well. With the changing in energy, and you guys know, but that's all we talk about is the energies and what's going on, is that a lot of these systems that were put into place to keep people from remembering are beginning to break down. And so people are starting to have these memories or dreams or things that are starting to come through, and it can be really confusing and upsetting because, again, as Tony has said, and we have said, it was not all pretty. It was not all glory in the sky going out and exploring space. And so it could really be impacting someone's life. So we want to spend some time today talking about the process of memories coming back and how to be healthy about it and what to do. So that's where we wanted to start.
Yeah, that's exactly where we want to start. You know, it's very interesting, though, before I get like questions. When I'm near somebody else that's been in the Secret Space Program, it starts to trigger me a little bit, and I feel on an energetic level. I get near other people that have either been abducted or something like that. It's like there's like a Geiger counter that goes off. That's either been in my presence or have actually been involved in that. It's like a big Geiger counter that goes off in my energy. So when I speak to you, or if I speak to, or if I'm around somebody else, I tend to feel it.
Interesting. I feel the same way. I think that just distance. I think that people that travel beyond the earth and travel long distances, I think there's something on an energy level that changes with distance. Like, you know what I mean? We're basically radios with 4 or 5 stations in us that are always emitting something. And I think that just traveling to other places changes your frequency, changes what you're emitting. And I think that's it's a theory of mine. It's just a personal theory, but I think that matters. As far as memories go, I mean, what part of that, what aspect, where do you want to begin with that?
We'll just go to the first question we have here. When your memories came back in 2015, how did you cope with all of them coming back at once? And I know you said talking to other people helped, but what other methods did you use?
It was terrifying, to say the least. And they didn't come back, they came back in chunks because memories kind of unfold. If you think back to your childhood, and there's memories, there's a lot of things you don't remember. But if you met another child and you ran into each other, you ran it, like you said, somebody with that frequency, somebody that inspires you to feel that way. If you ran into your childhood friend from kindergarten that you haven't seen, and you started to reminisce, and he remembered I'll just take a he. He remembered something that you didn't, and then mentioned it to you. Do you remember on the playground? Yeah. Do you remember behind the merry-go-round, that one tree? Before he said that, you didn't remember that, and now you will. That memory will unpack, because basically you remember everything, ever. And it's just a matter of accessing it. It's just unlocking the memory. So when somebody else can unlock a memory like that, more will, not only will just the existence of that tree, I'm making this up, of course, not only the existence of that tree, but other things, memories that kid didn't know about that you remember about the tree now will unfold. And what happened with me in the beginning was, once I learned about the time travel aspect of it, that I always knew I was abducted. I thought that it was just for a short time, and I thought it was many times. All the memories I had of abduction experience, because I went in front of the laboratory of the doctors of them many times in my time out there. So the vague memories of those, plus the original abduction event, I thought were just many different times. Mm-hmm. A lot of things. So when I heard about the 20 and back aspect, where they're taking you and you're living 20 years and they're putting you back in time. Once that happened, I went, oh my God, that happened. And what was able to happen was many memories unpacked, because now I knew that I wasn't just there for a night. The time aspect, it began to connect all the dots between the memories that I thought were either vivid dreams or not real, or now they started to coalesce, and they came in big chunks, and I could only handle so many of them at a time. And there were times when I dropped to my knees. I was walking in my yard and I started to remember things, and I fell on the ground because it was so much. And I still remember things. I'm still remembering new things. Just, we're talking about 20 years. I mean, right. I've never covered everything in any of my interviews. A lot of the interviews I talk about the exact same thing, but they're all different because there's just so many different details of it. And when you're remembering, when somebody's remembering things, people are really reluctant to write things down, thinking that they've got it's okay, I remember, I don't need to write it down. No, write it down, because more details are going to come. Those details, the original details, are going to fade as new ones come. Not that you forget them or anything, but just because you remember what's emotionally relevant. And in the beginning, there was no coping with it. There was no coping with it at all. It was terrifying because I was in complete denial. It was an entire lifetime of memories, and not only that, but of being abused. There were traumatic memories that came through as well that were very difficult, that are difficult to think about right now. And in the beginning, I thought that didn't happen to me. That couldn't have happened to me, mm-hmm. And it did. So the beginning process is very dangerous and very terrifying and very scary for somebody. And this is worth being said, is that the traumatic memories I resisted remembering. As they came to me, I don't want to remember that, like memories of being abused. And so, I mean, that puts up barriers. I think a lot of people have gone through traumatic things in these programs, because that's really the glory of the technology, is that they can use people all of a sudden. When you talk about being able to take somebody and put them back without their memories, now all of a sudden you can use them for things that were really sketchy, that you cannot do in society. You can do people for things. Not only that, but people can go in combat and have 90% of them blown away in a traumatic event and still live, and then have those memories erased. So a lot of people have many, many things like this. You think about what happens to women. You think about young people, young children that go. I wasn't groomed for what I went for. I ran into some people that had access to this program. They didn't like me, and so they said, throw him in there too. And so I wasn't groomed for it. A lot of people are groomed for it, and they still come back with combat memories, being mortally wounded over and over and over again, almost on a daily basis. And you don't want to, once they begin to remember, the mind still puts up that original barrier. And some people were so traumatized that their mind throws up barriers that they remember. They feel like they're remembering, but they're remembering an alter way that they coped with it.
Yes.
So
Right.
a lot of people, they talk about, I've talked to 1,000 people, thousands, probably a few thousand people that have memories that have gone through the same thing, that have contacted me, and I've had a one-on-one, chatting back and forth. Most of them, I don't have anything that can help. Like, most of them, I don't remember anything that goes along with what they remember. In other words, I can't substantiate what they remember because it's like far out to me. Most of them have experienced things that are really far out, but that doesn't mean that nothing happened. It doesn't mean that it's not real. I believe that something happened to every one of them, because nobody would seek this out and say, that happened to me. I was traumatized and I was in a 20 back. I remember it. And I say, well, what do you remember? And they think about it, and they don't want to talk about a lot of things, because what they're doing is accessing pain.
Right.
You see what I mean? There's a lot. Once you get into the real stuff, the real details, were you in combat? They don't want to talk about it, because just like that tree, how that tree opened up memories of what was in the tree and other things that happened. Were you in combat opens up combat memories of being hurt, of being traumatized. What'd you do? Did you have a boyfriend or girlfriend? It opens up a memories of them being hurt or being lost, losing that person. Because believe me, anybody that fell in love up there isn't with that person down here. You have a different life. Even if you meet each other, it's like your life is different. You're a different person.
Right.
You spoke earlier about that. You wanted to ask about what was the difference in your personality up there. So up there, I was trained in a certain way to do certain things and to behave in a certain way. It was training. But my core decision-making was the same. So there were a lot of things like, there's a lot of things that somebody, I don't want to say something and I'm trying to dance on political correctness. There are people that no matter what, their first instinct is to lie. Do you know what I'm saying? There are people that are just liars.
Absolutely.
It's a survival instinct. It's something to learn, whatever. Their core response to a certain amount of stress is to lie. There are people that their core response is to tell the truth. I like to tell the truth. Yeah. I mean, in life you have to stretch the truth sooner or later for the greater good. People do lie, but I am in my core. I prefer to just get the ugly truth out right now, so that we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah,
I pride myself on being, the majority of my days are very truthful. I'm a truthful person. And up there, even though I was trained to behave a different way, I was still a truthful person. And that's actually what carried my career on later. When I was in the cargo biz as a cargo engineer on the ship, on the Max von Laue, then that's why I did better than my peers, because I would give them the ugly truth. Whereas my peers were afraid of being punished if they failed. And they were afraid of being demoted and saying, no, I didn't finish it. I would just tell them the ugly truth, because I thought, I'm going to get in trouble anyway. They're going to find out anyway. And that was something so that part of my personality stayed. And, but there were a lot of things, there was a lot of bleed through, I think, from both sides. There was a lot of humiliation being a slave up there. And so there's a lot of times in my life down here where I fear humiliation, or I expect it. And it's not grounded in reality. It's not based in reality.
Right. It's that
I don't have that role in society, even though I'm a lower middle class person right now. I'm a lower middle class person. I'm not a doctor or a lawyer. I'm not a politician. I'm not somebody that garners a great deal of respect in my day-to-day life. I'm a normal. And but I'm definitely not a slave, and I still kind of have tendencies to be expected to be treated like that I have to compensate for, that I have develop personality things that I compensate because of those 20 years that I lived through. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people might have that. A lot of people have mystery PTSD. I think that's number one. That's across the board. because just waking up at night and looking at it gray is traumatic in its own. Without us being, we don't expect it. There's no pictures of them on TV. That to be in contact with another being, another intelligent life form, is something completely new to us and completely traumatic. Even if it's a great experience, it's still a traumatic experience, and you carry that trauma with you, even if it's just for a few minutes.
Right. And the thing is, going back a little bit to what you're saying, because, from my memories, which again, I don't want to remember it all, because I really am bringing through a lot of trauma, and I really feel that for a while, because after realizing that I haven't yet died of the brain tumor that is giving me all of these imaginations, right? Because you think you're crazy. It doesn't make sense. You cannot fit this into your life. And then, you go through that and you're like, I'm still here and I can still function over there. Normally, if you're batshit crazy, you're across the board, can't function, but I'm functioning well.
Oh, yeah. I've heard it from people that are very successful, very outstanding people have contacted me, and they remember the same stuff. And unfortunately, there is a little bit of leeway of things you can meditate on and concentrate on, but unfortunately, you can't pick and choose. Right. You can't choose to say, I'm only going to remember the times when everybody loved me. And you can't pick that about your own life, even in your organic, regular life. You can't pick and choose. I often wake up in the morning, and through my day, I always remember bad stuff that happens to me. I don't remember the good stuff. I remember, when I'm driving and the car does something, I remember the times my car broke down and left me stranded. I don't remember the times when it made a noise and then we got there. Do you know what I'm saying? So you really can't pick and choose. Once these memories, you're either going to turn it off, find a wall or a way to stop remembering, or you're going to have to put up with that. You're going to have to accept what was real. And I'm really very worried about a scenario of disclosure of ET life and these technologies where they try to sugarcoat it. Because
it's kind of interesting you say that, because we were going to.
So many people are going to have to be forced. They're still going to once it goes mainstream. Once it goes mainstream, the news is going to tell you, to everybody, every man, woman, and child in the world, like, do you remember that tree? Do you know what I'm saying? And that keystone memory is going to come out, and it's so many million people, and you're not going to stop the trauma. You're not going to stop the things that were basically illegal to us.
Right, and that's kind of why Chris and I's thoughts are, we don't spend a lot of shows. Chris does talk a little bit about speaker, but we don't, because what we feel is very important is a lot of inner work to know who you are, to be able to process what occurred to you, because the one common thread in my understanding and my belief system is that trauma-based mind control was used on every single person who was put into the program. And so when you are subjected to that, it doesn't matter if you are a soldier or not, it doesn't matter what you were doing, everyone was subjected to that. And so your morals become skewed. You would blow your brains out if you remember some of the things you potentially were involved in back there.
People don't realize it's being used on us now.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know how far away you're sitting from a TV set, but right here I can put on a regular, not rated R, not HBO or some fancy movie. I can put on the television, and I can flip through a few channels, and I can see someone being murdered immediately.
Right.
24/7. You don't see people falling in love in television anymore. It's very rare, the love story. We used to pay, and there was nudity. You don't see nudity, but you can see graphic mutilation, gore on rail. Our kids are seeing that nonstop because it's trauma-based mind control is what it is. They're traumatizing you. You don't know it. I've seen a few movies recently where I felt like I needed some counseling after because they were so gory. Yeah. And that's what they're feeding us. I mean, they're just throwing it at us because it instills a feeling of helplessness so that you won't, you know what I'm saying, that you'll kind of just go on with the herd. They're instilling a feeling of, that's what it is. It's helplessness that, you have an underlying feeling like, well, it's not going to work anyway. That's what that does.
Right.
And I also turning on the TV and the computer, I always see symbols. I have the ability to see what's other code and everything that's underneath it with my eyes, and I can actually see code flowing through there, kind of like in the movie The Matrix, where it rains down, but it goes from side to side and up and down. I see it all over the place, and it's increased. The gorier the thing is, it's actually the code is more increased than I see.
They're accessing a part of your mind that's a primal thing. They're putting in those whatever symbols, and then they're relieving it also at certain times. That's what it is. They put your brain in somewhere, and then they can relieve it, and then put a product in front of you when it's relieved. So then when you see it in the store, you don't think of the product or what it is or what it costs, why you need it or why you don't need it. You just think of it's relieving from all that pain, from all that trauma. So you buy it. And that's one of the main reasons they do it. But there are other reasons, and they're doing it all across the board. Politics. They're shaping genetics with the television. It's obvious once you step back and look at it, what they're doing. I mean, they're telling people who to date.
Right.
They're organizing couples. What young children are looking for in a mate is being influenced by what they see on TV.
Right.
And they're changing literally our humanity's DNA by influencing breeding on in the scale in the laws, using the law of large numbers with influencing breeding. So I mean, it's scary, but once you kind of like you said, everybody in the programs went through it. Mm-hmm. Once you got away from it and survived it, and then you look back on it, and now you kind of know the trick.
Right.
All the subliminal programming in the world doesn't work if you are aware of it.
Yeah, exactly. And also I've noticed some of the things I even look at, even on Facebook, all that will start to trigger some of the bad tendencies I had over there as well. See, I have personality conflicts that have seeped through, and major ones. And I even get what I think is a memory back, but it was really me coping with something horrible that was over there, and those two clash. And like, I'll look at a person that I know is being programmed by that code and just be horribly angry at them for like falling for something or doing something. And she knows this is all the time. I've almost gotten into fights over it because of that. And I'll want to leap over a counter at them. Like, why are you falling for this? I just want to shake them. And it's just like, I know I can't do that because they're victims.
It's disappointing that it's, and sadly it's most of humanity. So you've got a pretty wide, swath of targets there.
Yeah, I know I got to cut that out because that's not who I truly am. But
right.
But I have to cope with that. That's why I try not to interact with certain people. When I see the programming being active, I'm like, ugh.
And I think that's very important because again, what we're saying is that you may notice if you're starting to have these things come back, you may notice conflicts. Like we always say, who are you? You've got to know who you are. So if you say you're a genuinely nice person, you're fine with people having their opinions or whatever, but people say things and you become really like violent to them, that could be something of a personality conflict bleeding through from experiences from the other side. And you may need to really address this and get, do something about it because it will affect you over here.
A lot of the feelings that I get, I kind of get a version of the same thing that you described, where I feel like a great disappointment for people that treat other people badly, that fall for it, I feel a great deal of disappointment for people that think that money enables them to treat people without money better or worse, like they're better than them because they have a better job or a nicer car or whatever. I feel like you're so blind and not seeing that we're all made out of the same stuff. And, some people have more lessons to learn than others. Some people have been, they're definitely operate on a higher mentality as far as mankind is concerned. But that doesn't mean that anybody is worthy of anger, But I feel a lot of disappointment in people when I leave the house every day, just in the way that people treat each other. It's very disappointing. And it's because of programming. It's because of literally just consumerist programming, because that enables them. Because once you can create an enemy for you, then I can tell you what to do by saying your enemy's over there. I can point you in any direction I want now, and that's kind of what it's all about. And the other thing I found is you can't tell anybody out of it. You can't tell them. People have to learn on their own. Anybody that's been, I want to word this right too. I got to choose these words. Most of the people that watch these interviews, my interviews, yours, most of the people that are drawn to the subject had something happen to them.
Yes.
Something weird, something that wasn't supposed to happen. Most, bare minimum, they saw a craft in the sky that wasn't supposed to be there. That they know something's going on more than what we're being told because they saw it with their own two eyes. Anybody that's been told doesn't believe it because seeing is believing. So everybody, your audience, my audience, are people that had a clue that something's happened. And the people that don't, you simply can't convince them of it. They're going to have to see for themselves. It's that simple. So I will talk about what I remember and these things with anybody that asks, but I tell no one because it doesn't do any good. I can sit on a rooftop and shout it out, and I'm just going to look crazy to them because if they haven't seen it or experienced it, it doesn't make any sense. It's irrelevant. Basically,
Exactly.
big deal. It never happened to me, so big deal. It doesn't.
Which really brings up another potential to this, which is, you could be perfectly fine out there in society doing your thing, and then this starts to happen to you, and you will become a bit isolated. It's just because you may attempt to try and share with a family member or somebody, but then they're going to sit there right there waiting with you for that damn brain tumor diagnosis because, right?
They look at you
Because
like
they
a two-head.
cannot,
Oh yeah.
Well,
most of the people in my family and the close that know about my interviews, they've watched some of them. They won't talk to me about them. I think there's a genuine fear that either they'll have that. There's a fear that it'll turn into a conflict, which it wouldn't. There's another fear that it's true.
Yeah.
In other words, that they're going to confront me about it and say, all your interviews are bull. And then I'm going to talk them out of it and show them the evidence. And then they're going to have to unbelieve everything that they believe. So in order to believe that I was taken into the secret space program, that I witnessed the satanic ritual human sacrifice on Earth and was traded in a psychic service for the CIA, and then sold to the space program and went to Mars, the moon, Ceres, and then other galaxies, other planets, trading with other ET races for 20 years. In order to believe that, you're going to have to unbelieve a whole heck of a lot.
Right.
In order to believe that that's what's going on, that your world, that you think you're the master of this, you're the master of your universe. Most people, you got to think, once people get up around a certain level of income, they feel like they're that the system is working for them, that it's their system, it's not somebody else's system. The system works for me because look at me, I'm doing so good. Look at my shiny new thing I bought. So once they entertain the thought that they don't have jack and that there are people that have access to space daily and that there's a giant existence out there that's far above ours, that's earth-shattering and they don't want to hear it. I mean,
and some of them just aren't ready to hear it again because we talk about life as just kind of a spiritual journey, and and in all honesty, we talk about discernment, meaning what's good for you and what's not good for you right now. For many of the population, it is not good for them to hear about this right now. They are not ready for it. It is not healthy for them. You could have people that do start to have mental illness problems over the conflict of their current belief system and this.
Absolutely. What happens when the government comes out and says, we really are not in charge. Really, the ETs tell us what to do. And they've been in charge all along because they're far more advanced than we are. And there's nothing we can do about it. Like what happens when you say that publicly to the people? It would be hysteria. People want to believe that the system is working for them and that they are not working for a system.
Exactly.
We are owned by a greater system that's above us. We are working for that system and we provide for it on their beck and call. All of our resources and our most valuable resources, which is us. And so they're accessing that other ET races. It's a trade. We are a farm, and the system that we support and you pay into that you're working does not work for us. We are in fact working for it. And a lot of people, it's just that black and white of a coin that any of this is going to have to, they're going to have to admit it. They're going to have to admit that that's the deal. That a lot of people have complete faith in the system because they've been able to get whatever they want.
Yeah, and I the work that I do, I try to buck that system as much as I possibly can. Energetically, when something is discovered, I notice any information that comes out in the open, it automatically enters what I call the benevolent earthly akashic, or the big hard drive, which is the earth, and then it starts to surface for other people. Well, memories will start to unravel somewhere, or something starts to surface. It's that effect that pops up all over the place, and that starts to happen when anything is realized, even by a few people. All of a sudden, you start to see it pop up across the other side of the planet.
Again, well, the science behind that I read from the program that I was in Grill Flame, an offshoot of Grill Flame in the CIA in the early years of my 20 and back. And when I went back and discovered the paperwork to that and the science behind it, was that basically when you're like a radio, your brain, your body, it's your whole body. It's not just your brain, but your whole body gives off a signal. And when you think about it, and when you go to sleep, the signal becomes a lot stronger because all your other noise of being awake is not there. The radio waves bounce off the ionosphere, and actually in the ionosphere level of the atmosphere, everybody's thoughts are mingling. And so when you think of something and it goes in, that's where it's all happening. It's bouncing off just like the long wave radio. Mm-hmm. And so that's how everybody does have in a sort of random way has access to everybody else's thoughts in that state, in a certain state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've noticed that quite heavily doing my sessions, where like you said, people that come to me are of a kind. They experience these things left and right, even a minimal like UFO experience. Even the friends that I have now, at least two of them that I can confirm were also with me back there as well. I recognize them. I even had dreams about them prior to ever meeting them.
Yes. So that's happened to me as well. And what I found is that a lot of people that were close, because I wasn't close to a lot of people. I really wasn't. I didn't have a lot of friends for many years in that time. And a lot of people that were close to me have sought me out. And many of them don't remember. They don't know who they were or what they were doing, or they remember it and they kind of have it wrong. They give me their I remember you look so familiar to me, and then it was me that so-and-so, and I'm like, and I can look at them and I remember exactly who they were, what we were doing and what we did, and they were in a different part of my life, but I don't tell them that because it's irresponsible to tell somebody, you have to remember on your own accord. It's traumatic stuff. Like, I don't know what to tell, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to say this, but if you knew that somebody was raped or lost an arm, for instance, something very bad happened to them. If you knew that about somebody and they didn't remember it, would you rush to tell them about that? Do you know what I'm saying?
Right, exactly. And
it's irresponsible.
Right. And there's coping technique, because sometimes what happens to us is when we're feeling so powerless in a situation, we will create a story in our own head in order to champion it, let's say, in order to overcome.
Yeah.
And so sometimes people are bringing back memories, and it could be any of the above. It could be the implanted memories, because that was done to people. It could be a true memory. It could be your own personal coping memory of a situation. And all of those things are in there. So, for me, I have always been, do you really need to know everything? For those that are remembering, I personally believe you just need to know the gist of it, because of all these other competing issues. How do you tease out what was what? You're going to be able to get enough to know the gist of it. That first of all, this isn't glory. No one's going to remember glory here going on. You may have moments of happiness. I'm not going to say that.
I'm very suspicious of people that say, I was up there and I was in charge of everything, and then they moved me there and I was in charge of everything, and then this and that. Like, it's a great, when they're very happy about who they were, I'm very suspect of that, because anybody that was like that didn't come back. They're still there and they still have their memories. They didn't get blanked. Anybody that was at a certain level where they were in charge, where they had a great deal of freedom, came back and didn't have their memories erased. They're still who they are, all those people. So anybody that comes and says, I remember that I was in charge of all this stuff, and that it was a great experience, I'm very, very suspicious of those accounts, because it just doesn't jive with how it was ran. It wasn't ran like that.
No, it wasn't. And
Exactly.
you did have, and you said this before, I know you said it in the conference, and you were just trying to get people to think about this. What if you had the ability, as you said in the beginning, to erase someone's memory, to make them do 20 years for you? And on top of it, what you didn't say earlier, but you said in the conference was, and what if you felt you were elitist? What if you were an elitist who felt that there were different levels of humans and you were the cream of the crop in genetics or whatever, and these were all subspecies? What would you potentially be willing to do, and how would you potentially use people? Then you add into it who they answer to, because they're not the top of the food chain, and you add into that, and you add into this collection of energy, because you believe in this and because it's true, because we are energetic beings. And how do you collect energies in general to use them? By what you call the satanic practices. And ugly, nasty stuff occurred. One of my memories, I don't really share a lot of mine because, again, it's the bad side of things. And I know I was a slave, and I know I was in some, involved in some of this nasty stuff. Can you imagine, like everyone talks about right now, puppy mills, and they're all upset. Can you imagine the exact same thing happened to human mills?
Oh yeah.
Can you imagine stacks of children or whatever in cages, and they probably have never worn a stitch of clothes in their life because they were bred to be utilized in some of these things? It is horrific, some of this detail. And where I find that people could really feel like what's wrong with them is because here right now, they're kind, they like children, they don't want to see children harmed, they don't want to see another human being harmed, they want everyone to do well, whatever, but you have a memory somehow participating in that. And how do you deal with that conflict? And again, that's where we've spent so much time since we've been on the air, not focusing on this, because this is coming out, but how to prepare people by working on your inner self to know who you are. We speak a lot about the unknown world that they don't know exists. This is part of it, to prepare people for the conflict that they are getting ready to have if their memories start to come forward, because it is horrifically upsetting to see humanity's inhumanity to another human, and how bad it got, or it still is potentially.
Well, not only that, but you look at how some people can use, now you got to think about how some people can use other people, and then what happened? Like, look at there is prejudice. Like, I don't want to get in the same bandwagon, but there's racists. There are people that are racist. What happens when there are intelligent beings that are not human, that are walking around? How bad are they going to be treated by some people? Like, you gotta say, like, our culture has to be just ironed out at some point.
Right.
I don't know how to say it. I don't really have an answer for it. There's a lot of things that I think need to happen, but there's a lot of abuse still. I think a lot of it's been changed, and I also think that we're programmed to be abusive in a certain way.
Yeah.
Like I said, when they can create an enemy for you, they can put that enemy in any direction and make you face any direction they want. So we are taught. I've said this in many of my conferences. When not only is there gore and violence on all the TV shows, there's always a bad guy. There's always a good guy, and there's always a bad guy. So whenever you meet somebody, in the back of your mind, you're looking if they're a good guy or a bad guy. Oh, you're a good guy. That guy's, what do you say about him? He's a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
That guy, the other guy, I don't know, man. All I've ever seen, he cut that girl off in traffic. What a jerk. You think in your mind that he's always a jerk, because we are taught that in our society, that there's a good guy and a bad guy, and that's not the case. Like, there are good reasons and bad reasons, but everybody kind of has their own perspective that they look at, and because of our mentalities, like a straight black and white like that, so the good and bad is magnified. Good people aren't that great, and bad people aren't that bad. You got to look at the reason they're doing it, if it's worth doing it, and then make your decision from there. Like a lot of like you said, the puppy mill thing, like, we eat animal. I'm a meat eater. We eat animals. This goes on. It's a systemic thing. So at some point, there's a morality where, it's okay. There is a universal thing where people have to consent. There's consent. And so, like in the beginning, they had to get my consent. I didn't know what for, but I gave my consent. And so there was a certain way about it. So I learned a lesson from the whole thing of not to consent to everything.
Right.
Yes, and I do.
But just giving someone's consent, and just alone having someone's consent does not give you the right to abuse them.
Correct.
No,
correct.
Yeah,
and we tried, and like I said before, specifically talking about these issues, that's a lot of what we cover about how trickery is used to gain consent. Consent for something is expanded in their mind that it means all of the above. And, and so all of that exists. Now, we do try to make sure that people understand it is in our understanding. It is, and again, Chris talks to other races and this, that, and the other. And it is that humanity is expanding in spiritual consciousness. And that is going to be our way out of all this, because we actually do have co-creative abilities. And we can, once we know, choose our path that we want to take, which probably is going to be different than the current one we are on right now. But there has to be a time to allow for the awareness. And again, it affects people on a cellular level. And that's what's hard to understand. This information has to come in and process all the way down to the cellular level. You're going to have to purge. You're going to have to go through a mourning process of things. It's such a big ordeal. But once people know, the dynamics of the co-creative process start to change things. And one perfect example of that is the fact that we are sitting here right now, even having this conversation that is going to go out on the internet. Because 20 years ago, we'd all be dead.
We'd all be dead, yeah. And I like what you say about there's really no good and evil. I always try to perpetuate that with all the shows that I do. People have that dualistic, seed that's been planted in their brain, of dualism, yin and yang. Well, that's within everybody, whether they choose to do something stupid or something good. That's just how they are. And people can corrupt and become what people perceive as evil. Just like the Nazis. Yeah.
Right. And or that it's permanent.
Yeah.
It's not permanent. If I'm a good person, I'm doing good things, that doesn't mean it's permanent. You're only as good as your last song you sang. You're only as good an entertainer as your last show. And so, just because I did a bunch of good ones doesn't mean it's permanently good. It's likely that you stay like that. There was something I wanted to say was that, on the good and bad, since we've been polarized about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of the Osho teachings, that he was a guru. Remember Osho? And he said the only real sin is unawareness, and the only real virtue is awareness. That's one of his sayings. And it's kind of I think that a lot of people that are abusive to other people are just unaware of their plight. Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
yes.
Like you said, like an elitist person thinks they're better than everybody. A lot of the ETs think they're better, like the same way we think we're above animals. You think you're better than animals, so you can treat them a certain way, and and many aspects you are better than animals. We're another layer of consciousness above them, but they're made of the same stuff. I mean, it doesn't mean that I want to see them suffer greatly. Like we have a certain thing, like, and I'm just unaware of what it's like to be an animal. Right. I have my own awareness. I'm only aware of mine, and I'm unaware of them.
Right.
So I mean, it's kind of like how decisions get made, and I think that's the really only thing to really. If that changed, that I think that's what's wrong with these programs. One of people being taken where they go a long way. They think that you're not going to remember it anyway. You're not going to remember it anyway, so we can do whatever we want because you're going to not remember it. So. You just put
I had a similar memory to yourself in that respect. I was extremely mad at these people, and they said something very similar. Oh, you're never going to remember this. You're not going to
remember it anyway. That's exactly what they said to me. Surgery. I had surgery with no anesthesia. They tied me down and gave me surgery, and it was very painful. And I thought, how could you do this? Give me something for them. And he said, you're not going to remember it anyway. We're not going to waste the time, the resources. And it wasn't even about money. It was about the resources of giving me an anesthetic. And I just remember that it was always, always, always the same answer whenever they did something. How can you do that? You can't do this to people. well, yeah, you're not going to remember it anyway. You know?
Yeah, we end up
And-
remembering, that's the thing. The trauma of it, this is how dumb they actually are, because the trauma of it ends up triggering you later on to actually remembering it.
Remember, right. And I think on a societal level, like when you think about all of society, if everybody went through that, it changed me. I'm not the same person I was meant to be when I was born. Because of going through that program, it changed me. The day I was abducted on that night, I did 20 years. They put me back the same night. The next morning, I woke up. I was a completely different person. And my dad said it to me all the time after, I want my son back. What happened to you? He would ask me, you're changed, man. I was 10 years old. And he said, I want my son back. So I was different. So my life was deviated. And how many other people that went through the same thing? So what would society look like if that never happened, and if it never took place? We do remember.
And one of the sad things I think that occurs, because in the line of what you're saying, is that, when I was younger, I was brilliant in the maths and sciences area. Mm-hmm. When I came back, it's like I'm dumb as a box of rocks all of a sudden. So you're not going to be brought back necessarily at the skill level that you had there, because again, they don't want someone who could rise above anything.
I was a straight A student, all A's and B's, top 5% of the class in 4th grade. They took me, I think it was April or May of 4th grade in that year in 82 and 81, 82, I forget. But they took me at the end of that school year. The next year in 5th grade, I went to an E student, D's and E's, because I was overworked, because I didn't want to do the work anymore, because I'd lived 20 years of hard labor the day before.
Yeah,
the day before.
Did a PTSD already surrounding that. I was the same way. I was good at the high mathematics and stuff like that. Once this took place, I started to become dumber. I started going D's and F's and all that, the same identical thing. And in grade school, I went through a math course where then the teacher was programmed to automatically accuse me of cheating on stuff that this person had no knowledge of me even doing. And that started to happen, even doing certain tests, standardized tests that they would have us do in classes. We had the Men in Black show up in our high school to get people, basically they were trying to recruit people to see where their intelligence level was at. And I was told, I heard a voice in my head say, don't do anything they say. Do not do anything they say. And I sat there, I didn't answer any of the questions, didn't do anything, and I was left alone. Surprisingly enough, after that.
Because you already went through it.
Already went through it, yeah.
So it's
the same thing. I couldn't join the military ever. Every time the subject came up, I said, can't join the military. Nope.
Yeah.
Later in life.
My father wanted me to do that too, and I was like, nope, not doing it.
But I think when people start to question themselves, again, this is one of the areas as well. Think about school, because I know I went through periods, and again, waiting for the brain tumor, but this started happening to me in my late 20s. Where I even began to question, did I really graduate from high school? Little things like this. I don't remember parts of elementary school. Did I really graduate, or did I? And I'm like, why am I even questioning myself on these things? So I was so confused. I'm just telling you the confusion that was there, trying to figure out life events and these things, and did things really happen? It really does do a number on you personally. What
happened to me, so when I first got the memories back, it was the same thing. There were big chunks of memories. There was something very profound happening when I was getting my memories back. At that point, I knew that I was abducted, and I had these memories, and then I learned about the 20 in the back, and I entertained them. They all came back, but I had no proof. And what happened was, so a lot of people are taken, and they're taken off world, and they never come back. So then for the 20 years, and then they put them back, or forever X amount of time. What I did was I remembered Peru, and I remembered Seattle. And so I went on Google Earth one day, only a few days later, it was like a week, the same week. And I went on Google Earth, and I thought, I'm just going to look around, and I found the house. And then I went to the Peru, and then, so for me personally, so it's hard to state this as evidence to you, to an audience, to say, well, I remembered it first, and then I found it. Because other people because any skeptic will say, no, you just looked down there and then now you remember. But
that's really not the way it was. And then on top of that, Ceres, I found maps of Ceres, and I remembered flybys that we did of the guy. There was a geyser on Ceres, and then into the where the hangar bay was. And I remembered the route we went. And then when I found the map, it was the same way. It was the same, like the reality of the layout of Ceres matched my memories of our flight pattern, the flight route. So these are things that, when I found the house in Seattle, I freaked out. And then I was able to find information of the owners. I found their pictures, found their obituaries. Pretty much every time I remembered something that was evidence that I would go and look up online, it panned out. I was looking for things to prove me wrong, because then I could just put it all to bed and go on with my life. I was looking for everything. I wanted to be in denial, and I looked for things that would prove me wrong, that the house wouldn't be there, that the Puerto Tawantinsuyo, Peru wasn't there. And then I remember flying through the state of Acre from there to Colombia, to Santa Marta, Colombia. And of course, it's a straight line. That was before I knew that, like these are things. So when somebody gets these memories, a lot of people don't have the luxury of looking up where they were on Google Earth that I did. So that led me to contact other people. That's what let me take my story to the next level. Was I needed help, because now I had legitimate memories of things that were factual. I can prove in my life I never went to Seattle. My mom and my sister and my siblings, they all know. They're with me every day of my life. They knew that I never went there. But I know my way around that island. I know my way around Seattle. And I went there in 2016, September of 16. I think it was 16. Yeah. And I knew my way around. I knew it intimately. I knew a better way than Google. The Google Maps was taking me to the house. I knew the better route, and I went that way. These are things that were evidence to me. So like you said, am I going crazy? Is this real? Did I even go to school? I think I go back to my life after this interview today. I'm going to go back to my normal life, and I'm going to worry about fixing my ceiling today. I'm in my garage right now, but I'm going to go back to being a normal guy, and these memories go away. And it always comes back where I go, did that really happen? And then I reprove it to myself, because Seattle happened, because Seattle definitely happened. And I definitely, it wasn't a vague memory. That's the other thing, is I went there, and the memories that I had of Seattle weren't vague or inaccurate. They were freakishly accurate. I knew where the rocks were on the beach. I knew the flowers at the house. I know the layout of the house. I knew where there's a pond when you hop the fence over the house. You know what I'm saying? I know the weather pattern there in Seattle. I've talked to other people that lived on that island, and I talked to them as if I lived there, because I did. But in my life, in Tony's life, I never have. Mm-hmm. And I have that kind of intimate knowledge of it. So if I have to trust those, then I trust the space memories as well. And because you never know, like you said, some things are implanted. I'm sure they put things in there to make me not talk about it. They were very concerned with me remembering at the end, because they have chronovision. They could see in the future. They could see probable futures when they were putting me back. And alarms went off with me remembering I wasn't supposed to. And there were a lot of factors that came together for me to get put back in without getting a lobotomy.
Yeah, and I ran into things like that too. These forces out there are very concerned that I'll remember all that I have stored here. I'll bring it all to the surface. Some of them are actually quite scared that I'm going to actually remember some of these. There's fear behind this. And last time when we spoke, I spoke about Alaska. Well, I found out Homer was one of the places I had gone to. And I was reading two people that were actually there in Homer. And normally I do remote viewing and do all this other stuff, but I could tell them the intricacies of different offices, different buildings, all this other stuff. So no, I'm not digging this out of remote viewing. This is memory that I'm digging this out of. And
you should go there. You should plan a trip.
Yeah.
I mean, if you haven't already, you should definitely go there. And go with somebody. Don't go alone. My problem was when I went to Seattle, I went alone. If somebody would have been there and filmed it, mm-hmm. It would have been admissible, because I was going places where I could prove that I'd never been. And right around the corner down the street, I could say, up there on the left is a lighthouse. And I just didn't have anybody there with me to witness it or to film it. And so that's honestly, that's something that can prove this whole phenomenon. I mean, mm-hmm. that's a very good opportunity. If you've been there, then, I knew it to the level when I went back there, I was like, wow, that's new. Like I could recognize the new places. I remember a gas station that was a little tiny gas station that now it's a big market. It's one of those big gas stations with the store. Oh, wow, that got built up. Like I had that kind of memory. And so, I mean, I would recommend it that if you could go there, spend a day there, and check it out, because that's how you remember. That's memories beget memories. They unlock memories. The keystone. That's just how they're stored in us. That's how it works. When you remember one thing, it opens the door to more things being remembered, and we bounce off of each other. Like that's people. That's what's great to see old friends, because they're going to give you old memories that you have long forgotten that'll come back to you.
That's how one of my friends in Nebraska was. He contacted me probably a couple months ago, and he goes, I don't know where I'm getting these strange memories from, and I'm getting weird PTSD. He knew enough to know it was PTSD, and I said, okay, I know exactly what this is. Call me, And I told him, and I had fragmented memories. It's still fragmented. I haven't put together this specific event yet, but days before I met him here as me, I had memories of us. I don't know if it was a false flag event we were involved in or something, but something he was very regretful of and very, very sad over. And I remembered his face. And when I first met him, I was thinking, I know you. Well, when I talked to him on Zoom or on Facebook chat, I said, okay, this is, remember, I put this thing in my book. I put a memory, what I didn't know was a memory in my book. I thought it was a channeling at the time. And it was actually this thing between me and him. It had involved the Navy on an aircraft carrier somewhere. I don't know where this took place at. And the Navy was very angry at us over something we had done. And I told him this. I uttered it in a particular frequency. When I start to bring something out, I utter it in a certain frequency. He started to sob uncontrollably when I started to tell him, and he resonated heavily with it. And it started to release when I started to talk to him about it. But that's why you always say it's irresponsible to tell somebody off the bat, because we're in a certain frequency, like what you were saying off air, that if I start to utter something, it triggers
Yes.
the person, and that's what happened to him. But now he's over it, and he's actually balanced again. I've noticed if this is suppressed, your energy field goes haywire. If it's something that's trying to come out, and you become vulnerable to etheric attacks, all this other stuff, psychic attacks, all of this stuff, and once you bring it out, your energy automatically rebalances, and you're okay again, at least relatively okay. You're still traumatized by the event, but you're okay.
I've met people that are, they cover it up. There's alcoholism. There's addictions that happen because of the suppression. People that don't want to remember, what they went through, what they did, and all the memories. To me, the clearest memories are the most emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Literally the traumatic things that happened that were very emotional, and the good things that happened that were very emotional. The emotions seem to be just a more clear, I guess, way for memories to be stored is with emotion involved, because those are the memories that are very clear. Like, you don't remember, a lot of people don't have clear memories of your just day-to-day grind of getting up and brushing your teeth,
Mm-hmm.
So that's how. So that makes sense that he would remember, even if you only remember one thing, it'll be your most emotional event, whether good or bad.
Exactly. And so I know, Tony, you just have a little bit more time because we're trying to keep this to an hour because you got things to do. What I want to do is kind of conclude this conversation with something that we've been talking about for years. And again, and it not only is going to apply to whatever was going to you if you were pulled into that program, it's going to apply the same to realizing the structure of domination and control just in everyone's day lives. What we try to tell people is this is a very legal world, and everybody's been pumped into, there needs to be, you owe me, or or this kind of attitude, or you need to pay, or whatever that's going on. And we try to break the sad news that is not going to happen. The truth of the matter is, as you said, when you're dealing with the secret space program, you've got, humans from this earth that have done their thing, and they are solidified out there in their own places and this, that, and the other. You've got ET races that are solidified. Yes, they may have experimented on you for their own purposes or this, that, and the other. But believe it or not, it's something that as you remember all this, and it's going to bring back anger. It's going to bring back the wanting of some sort of justice, but it's not going to happen. So we have to find a way to balance through all of this. And if we say if there is a justice, it's going to be the spiritual growth, because the regular humans, let's say, those that aren't already out there, we are going to rise within the galactic community. It's meant to be. We're meant to grow like that. And it's growing and pursuing. But there's going to come a time where, potentially in some people's lifetime right now, that they may come across and have to look in the eye someone who potentially didn't treat them very well before. And so, there's got to become a way to heal and become imbalanced, as you guys were saying. How do you become imbalanced? To understand that that's probably the path we're going to go to, these great jailings of people, and it isn't going to probably happen.
Well, I think on some level there are going to be some heads that roll, and I think that they're going to be tokens, so for people that demand that. But I wrestle with it a lot. A lot of people have done me wrong just in the last few years. I get my phone hacked constantly. After coming forward, seriously, I get hacked constantly. I've always got somebody spying on me, and I feel very violated by it. But on some level, it's like, am I going to chase down everybody? Am I going to go punch them all in the face? It's kind of like we live in a forest. We do not live in a neighborhood. We live in a forest, and the Earth is in a forest of planets. We're in a forest, and the law of the forest is that there is no law. And you just have to deal with it. Like you are what you are at the core. You're the kind of energy that you are from the core of you. And you're seeking out. That's what our lives are. Is we're seeking out, things about ourselves. And some people are seeking out things, and they have to learn on their own. People that abuse other people have to learn on their own that they're shooting themselves in the foot, kind of thing. And so there's a I hate to use the word forgiveness to forgive everything, because forgiveness means forgetting, and I don't think you should forget either. But I think
actually define forgiveness that way. I try to say people, what forgiveness does is it unties you from the memories. It unties you from everything. You would never agree that behavior is okay, ever. I'm not saying forgiveness in the sense that I forgive a certain behavior, but people are so tied to it they can't move forward. And so forgiveness gives you a balanced perspective to release yourself from it so that you can move forward.
To deal with your own anger. I went through a little bit of an anger phase with all this, but for me it was so long ago, and for what I went through, the anger is really not a beneficial thing, to sit around angry at the people that did this. There is a time for anger, though. However, I feel anger is a healthy emotion, and people shouldn't just absolutely never be angry. I think people need to learn how to communicate. Like, if you're angry at me, I need to learn how to communicate to you and still be, honest. And people that are angry need to know how to draw the line and say that's why I'm angry. Okay, now it's over, and let it pass. But I think that for the most part, like, that's what you people that want reparations or feel that they're owed something, that it was a service. It's kind of like, we're going to get a reset where the past is the past and what's done is done. And we're going to have to move forward. And like I said, that doesn't mean forgetting it, because we're going to learn when there's we're going to get a disclosure in our lifetime.
Yes.
We're going to get some form of disclosure, even if it's an invasion, whatever it is. We're going to get some very, very, as a whole, as a species, we're going to get some very big lessons thrown upon us very soon. And so people just need to concentrate on the high ground. What kind of person you really are at the core. What kind of person you are at the core. Like, when everything is stripped away and you're just your base consciousness, what you are. Are you a person that's, out to get for yourself only, or are you on the team with the rest of us that are all made out of the same thing? And really, it boils down to that, and I think once you can identify. Yeah, once you can identify that will settle it all.
I think what you're saying is what we've tried to say, and it's that enormous self-reflection of what we call the authentic self. Who are you? And don't be robbed of who you are, being stuck in all of this, either anger or whatever. So, you've said that a few times, and I hope people have heard it, because, it really is the bottom line. Who are you? And don't let anyone rob you of who you actually are. Don't give them that power.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that our world is based, like a lot of our society, in America and in a lot of the commercialized world, our society is based around making us behave as like someone we're not. They're trying to entice you into acting like you're somebody that you're not. And a lot of people just have blinders on, not only with themselves, but then they start to see other people as something that they're not. Because everybody is beautiful. Everybody is really beautiful, but most people don't see it that way. And, you're in your day-to-day life, you're kind of trained to judge people and quickly. And, whatever, just form teams, and he's a good guy, he's a bad guy.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, so exactly. And I know this was a different kind of interview than probably you're normally used to being asked to do, more before telling you story, but for us, this is really the nitty gritty of it, a lot of it, because so many people, I don't even think people can imagine how many people were actually pulled into the program to be utilized for whatever, and then put back in. So a lot of people, we believe, if they're not now, they're going to start running into these problems. So we really,
absolutely.
I can't express enough to you, Tony, how much we appreciate your frank honesty, about some of this stuff and what the potentials are for people and what they may go through. So I just want to give you a second for any last words, because we're going to keep our promise and not go late.
Well, I haven't been doing a whole lot of interviews lately. There'll be a couple conferences that I got coming up in the year. I think that a lot of it's winding down. I think that they've settled on a plan for disclosure, and we're going to get a disclosure. I think it's going to be another 3-4 years, maybe 5 years, but we're going to get an official disclosure, and it's going to go from once the genie's out of the box or out of the bottle, then there's no stopping it. So I think that just the everyday people that have their heads in the sand, that are living in our system and doing well in it, are going to have to adapt to a new system, and I think that's the holdup. I think that's going to be the holdup. I think, people are going to have to unlearn that they are the person that they're not, and learn that we're part of a bigger nature. The nature extends beyond the sky. That and then there's an illusion that we're all in a neighborhood, that we're all just us, when in fact you are in a forest. You're in a forest. And you know about that. Well, you said about the entity attachments.
Mm-hmm.
They're like mosquitoes
Exactly.
in a forest, on your soul, to your energy. An entity attachment is just like a mosquito. People think like demons, and they think that it's this big powerful thing, like in the horror movies. It's not. It's a mosquito, and it's feeding off your energy that day, and then it goes away, and you go back to yourself. You have a bad day, and you go, "What happened?" It's because there are entities that exist in the universe, and that's a natural part of the universe. It's just natural. At one point, you may have been one, So we live in a forest, and the Earth is a outcrop of a giant forest in the galaxy, and the galaxy is in a giant forest of other galaxies, and so on. And so the rules are, there are no rules, and so you just have to, we have to band together as one and kind of realize that we're all the same kind of being. We're all made of the same stuff, and to get on with it, and not just live off vampire off each other. And I think that's kind of in a nutshell what it's going to change once we learn that humanity is just humanity and not all of humanity, right? Once we learn that we're just humans. We're not every human, that there are other beings, there are other species that are just as smart as us, and even species that are way ahead of us, way smarter than us, way more developed. We don't have any of that in our culture either. You ask somebody off the street, even if they believe in ETs and UFOs, they don't believe that there are higher, more advanced beings. And I sat down and had a talk with a Bible person somebody that's very deeply religious. He said, they're not in the Bible. And I said, excuse me, where do the angels live? He said, but they're angels. They're not us. By definition, they're extraterrestrials.
Exactly.
They live in heaven, above in the sky, and they come down and do God's work. What are you talking about? Those are extraterrestrials by definition, even if it is an angel. And so, I mean, people got to open their minds to the fact that not only are we in the forest, but we are not the top of the development chain. That we're not the most advanced being, and we have great things to aspire to, and there are great things that are going to come to us after a disclosure.
Yeah, I completely agree there. For a while, I saw the benefit of like a slow drip, so there wasn't, this mass panic. But now, like you said in that conference, we're ready at this point.
Everybody pretty much knows. Everybody kind of, the other thing is they can pull the wool over your eyes, but you still kind of know, everybody kind of knows anyway that we're not alone. They just don't know the extent of the reality of it, and they painted such a skewed. They changed the picture of it so many times. They give us a little bit so it's believable, and then they give you 10% of the truth and then 90% of lies. And then some of them give you 50% truth and 50% of lies, and some give you 90% truth, and those 10% of lies are very powerful, and you believe the wrong thing. We're going to get the truth eventually. I'm excited that it'll be in our lifetime that I get to see it. Because we're really going to talk about Earth before and after a disclosure, BD and AD.
Exactly.
So it's an exciting thing to think about.
It is. So hopefully you're up to chatting again another time, Tony. I hope so.
Absolutely, I'd love to.
Probably the best lead-in is now to talk about, because we have our own thought processes of what we think are going to happen with the disclosure. I know you have yours. Maybe we can share them and, just put ideas out there for people of what the potentials are. But anyway, I cannot express enough, as I was saying, we so love speaking to you because you're so authentic and genuine. We do have to be mindful and somewhat be politically correct in what we're saying from a bigger perspective. That's understandable. But in general, we really hope that this reaches people who are potentially going through and having these things to understand that, no, it's not always a pretty process. But many people are going through this. There are going to be places for you to go to talk to, even though it may not be your family. And you're not crazy, first and foremost. You're not crazy. This really could have happened to you. So we're going to leave it at that for today's show. And again, I just, if you haven't seen Tony, look at the first interview, then go see some of his other things. And we hope you have a better perspective of everything. So we're going to leave it at that. Tony, if you just don't mind hanging on for a minute, and we'll say bye, everybody, tonight.
Thanks for having me. Goodbye.
All right, there we go.
Thank you so much. Did you feel good about? Was that a bit cathartic for you?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Not bad.
I just don't know that you ever really, I don't think on air you've ever really, I don't know if you have or haven't, because I haven't seen all your stuff, been able to really get into the nitty gritty of the memory, because it's, again, like I said, it's so near and dear to our hearts. What will happen to people. But I'm just curious because, again, Tony, I remember some horrible things. And, but I am curious of whether this one memory that I had, and again, for me, it's hard for me to know, am I remote viewing something, or was I really there? And sometimes I don't know the difference. I think I'd prefer to say I was remote viewing than remembering, honestly. But there was an incident that I saw, and I want to know if you've even heard of this before, where I was in a room, and it was interesting. It was almost like a cafeteria, but I know it wasn't on Earth. I don't think it was on Earth. I think it was someplace else. But anyway, my point is, then I'm watching these young men, and they're in a military uniform. They're young men just gabbing at one another, and I don't know where they were, and they were told to come into this room. Now, the interesting thing about it is there wasn't a Caucasian among them. So we're talking military men of other human races here on Earth, either Black or Hispanic or something. And they were walking to this room. Now, there was a person explaining this process to me. And where I really got horrified is they basically said, because you said my mind was translating a different language, it came across as being, and this is where the body gets separated from the head. And then all of a sudden, these men who were in a great mood, they were in a great place. They weren't afraid. There was nothing going on. They were in this room, and I guess from what I was explained is that they were gassed because the goal was they had to not be afraid. So they were completely gassed. You see their faces twitching or whatever. And it had something to do with them then, I don't know how to explain this. Their head, their brain, this may have been early along. They were somehow then being transferred to be like these, I don't know, the RoboCops, you know,
like
and I don't know how to explain it, but it was a process of where they were then, I think their head, I think their brain, I don't know. Something was being transferred into a mechanical, and they were no longer themselves. They were now completely under control, but for some reason they needed that part
They needed
of
a human brain.
the human brain inside of
They
it.
took their consciousness, and so on Ceres there were no colored people in the slave program, in the 20 and back program on Ceres, and that was because the authorities there didn't want to invest in a separate form of mind control. In other words, the mind control techniques, they can run you through, it's like a car wash, like you, for lack of a better word. They could put a Caucasian man on one side of the car wash, program it to what they want him to be, and on the other side of the, say a soldier, and on the other side of the car wash, out walks a soldier.
Okay.
Fully trained with commands and everything. If they put a black man through the same car wash, they will not get a complete soldier out the other end. They have to build a new car wash.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
So all of the African people went to other colonies that were geared to that, and a lot of them went out to mining colonies out on the outer into the Kuiper Belt. There were a lot of them out there. That's where they were. Because I rode with some on the way back. I met a couple of black people out there, and but in my particular colony there were none, and that was why. That's what it was explained to me by an officer that's why. So it seems like they may have been converted into soldiers. You know, they were soldiers in the first place, and then they were converted into. Now Jason Rice, if you're familiar with him, talked about they have a werewolf version where they were soldiers, and we carried soldiers on our ship one time. And they were completely autonomous. They had an armor suit on, and their suit would freeze so that they could sit down like they would crouch down and sit there, but it wasn't in a chair. It was their pants that would lock, and they would stay there for hours, 10 hours. Their suit fed them and kept them, like all their biofunctions. They could stay in there for 20 hours. There was an X amount of time they could stay sitting still before they had to move. But then he blew a dog whistle, and they would stand up at attention and await commands. And these guys, they were like robots, and they were completely deadly fighting force. They were made for this. So it sounds like that's where those guys that you're talking about went into something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just remember the big deal was it wasn't a successful transfer if there was any fear. So they made it, it was made a big deal to make sure that everything was cool. Cause I remember them walking, joking. It was nothing was a big deal. And I don't know how they applied the gas, that they didn't know, but then all of a sudden it's almost like their face was like ripped. I don't even know.
Like this undulating,
I do not even know how, but I was just horrified. And then the bad news is, Tony, they used the leftover body, and they just fed the Dracos with it.
They just gave them to the Draco. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And that's what they did with.
So it sounds plausible to you. I was like, but there wasn't a Caucasian among them. And I thought,
that's why, because the Caucasians have, like I said, it's a different mind control process. It's a completely different machine so they tended to be segregated, not because of racism, but because of the technology of you know what I mean? Black people have a different psyche about them. They have different breaking points than white people do. And so there's a different mind control set. And that's at least that's what was explained to me. It's not like I was an expert at it.
right.
Yeah, that's
my daughter's bugging me.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting. He said that also, going along with what Jason Rice said about the werewolf beings. I have ghosts that come to me of people that have died in the programs and died out there in the 20 and back periodically. Groups of them where the Nazis had wronged them out there. Their histories weren't told. They want it out. And that's some of the work that I do. Well, I had one come to me that said that he was an African boy, probably about somewhere around 16, 17, something like that. And they'd strapped him into a machine and had pumped some different DNA into him, and he became one of these werewolf beings. And he died in combat against other humans like Jason Rice, where they had been pitted against other soldiers in one of those false flag events. That's how that came up. And he came to me and said, "This is what took place. They turned me into this. They had aliens help them, and they turned me into this. And please tell people." And that came out in a session with another friend of ours who this ghost was surrounding, because this friend of ours had also been there in a 20 and back. He had been on site, but I was also seeing it through my own eyes, so I was anchoring to another self of mine. I had actually witnessed this as well. And I can anchor more easily to these different things if I am in them in some fashion, either past life or a 20 and back. I can literally use them as anchor points to see.
I wonder if these are things they're going to let out, if this is something they're going to admit, or, like these are reasons to not tell us.
Yeah.
I would think it's going to be not the story. So when we actually get together and we talk about disclosure and our thoughts, this would be a part of the conversation, because they're going to try to protect their asses. They don't want
Totally. They're gonna give us a sanitized version of it.
Yeah.
I've got to go. My daughter's going to be late for her class. So
Yeah,
I'm going to get out of here.
Yeah.
Stay in touch. We'll do it again. I'd love to talk again.
Yeah,
I would
care.
like to talk personally sometime too, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Just hit me up on Facebook.
All right. Thank you,
Bye.
Tony.
Thank you.
Have a
All
good
right. Thanks. You're welcome. Take care. Bye.